Good morning, everyone. We are gathered here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. And I also want to recognize the Métis people who share a deep connection with this land. I'm Heather Sweet, the MLA for Edmonton Manning and the Critic for Rural Economic Development, Agriculture and Forestry. I'm joined by my colleague Marie Renaud, the MLA for St. Albert and Community and Social Services Critic. We're here today to call on the UCP government to immediately launch an investigation into the massive spike in grocery prices here in Alberta, to determine whether price gouging is occurring, to assess the lack of competitiveness and explore measures to improve it, and most importantly, to take an immediate step or measure to lower costs for families in Alberta. We do not enter this work lightly, and our opposition caucus is actively working to arrange discussions on our own with the major grocery chains operating here in Alberta. But we cannot wait any longer to take action. Alberta families have suffered far too long. They are facing an affordability crisis not seen in 40 years. They've seen prices skyrocket on everything from gas prices, utilities, insurance, and housing. But nothing reminds them more on a daily basis of just how expensive things have gotten than the price of food. Last month, we saw the overall inflation started to cool, but food prices continue to increase more than 10% month over month. Alberta retail prices show increases of more than 30% in some cases in the year-over-year prices on goods such as vegetable oil, iceberg lettuce, and certain cuts of beef. The price of bread is up nearly 25%, and the butter to put on it has raised over 20%. While prices soar, wages in Alberta haven't kept pace with inflation, forcing more and more Albertans to rely on credit cards just to afford the basics like milk, eggs, and vegetables. The Consumer Index showed that in April, half of Albertans were just $200 away from not being able to pay their bills at the end of the month, the highest level in the country. Albertans are going farther into debt, while the large corporate grocery chains are reporting record profits. Loblaws alone earned $387 million, and Empire reported $187.5 million in their last reporting period. That is why we're calling on the UCP to investigate potential price gouging and inflation profiteering. With record profits and large margins ever since the pandemic, the investigation will be responsible to review the business practices of the large corporate grocers over the last 2 years to ensure they're not capitalizing on the cost of living crisis. This will include an investigation into the rising price of beef, which I called for earlier this year. We call on the investigation to assess the impacts and the lack of competition in Alberta and propose recommendations on increasing competitiveness in Alberta if needed. We have arguably the least competitive market for groceries. Alberta has the lowest share of independent grocery retailers and only 2 of the 3 large corporate grocers who control the highest concentration of retailers in any province. This means a high majority of Alberta grocery retailers are in control of just 2 corporations. They have more power to set prices and drive up independent competitions. Albertans deserve transparency when it comes to their grocery costs. So if prices increase, they can be confident it will not just be padding the profit margins of the large corporate grocers. We are hoping that this investigation will do just that. I will now like to turn it over to my colleague, Marie Renaud.
Thank you, Heather. And I'm proud to stand here with you today in support of making life more affordable for all Alberta families. We know that the increased cost of food hurts those closest to the poverty line. Every dollar increase pushes more and more Albertans into food insecurity. That means hundreds of thousands of Albertans won't be able to afford a balanced diet, or are worrying about running out of food at the end of the month. Some are going hungry, they're missing meals, and some may not eat for days because of the lack of money to actually buy food. In fact, in a new Canada-wide survey released today, the majority of respondents said they are using coupons, hunting for sales, to cope with rising food costs. Nearly 20% were also reducing meal sizes or skipping meals altogether in order to save money. We've been hearing that Alberta's 107 food banks are seeing an alarming increase in the need for services. Just last week, new data showed that Alberta is seeing a 34% increase in food bank access year over year, and nearly 58,000 kids relied on the food bank in March. Inflation hit a near 40-year high, and wage growth in Alberta has significantly lagged behind. Families are feeling a cut in their real wages. The UCP is forcing Albertans to pay more income taxes, more in property taxes, utility costs, school fees, tuition, interest on student debt, park fees, and so much more. It's even worse living on income support and AISH. Ever since the UCP de-indexed income supports, AISH recipients have watched their real dollar value fall month over month. That means nutrient-rich foods like eggs, meat, and dairy are being replaced with low-cost, highly produced items so they can have enough to eat. Often it's just about filling up. We recently urged the UCP to immediately return to the legislature with us and reverse these harmful policies. We could lower income tax, we could raise benefits, we could increase grants to nonprofits, we could build affordable housing, we could increase rebates, we could freeze tuition, we could cut interest on student loans, and we could certainly put back the cap on insurance. These are all measures that would cut costs right now, but we need to get to the larger systemic issues too, and that's why this investigation into grocery prices is so important. Now, folks here are likely aware that Canada's Competition Bureau has recently announced it intends to study competition in the grocery industry at the national level. However, we believe there are policy measures specific to the provincial government that should be explored. We've been told by some stakeholders that certain regulatory measures fall within the jurisdiction of the province. The Competition Bureau noted in launching its study that the price of food has risen at a sharper rate than overall inflation for 10 straight months. And in response to the House of Commons recently passed a motion demanding that affordable and fair food strategy be developed that includes an investigation into grocery chain profits, increasing penalties for price fixing, and strengthening competition laws to prohibit companies from abusing their dominant positions. The motion passed with unanimous support from all political parties. New Democrats, Liberals, Conservatives, everyone came together to do what is right for families. Now it's time for us, here in Alberta, to follow suit. Albertans can't wait for a spring election. They need help now. My message to the government is to do the right thing and to launch the investigation today. Thank you, and now I'll turn things over to Heather.
Thank you, Marie. And I should add that the federal motion also specifically sought to strengthen competition laws to prohibit companies from abusing their dominant position in the market to exploit purchasers or agriculture producers. And I've heard from producers who are struggling so much to make ends meet in this province. They certainly are not reaping the rewards of these higher prices. So the question really is, who is profiting while producers and Alberta families suffer so much. That's why we're trying to get to the bottom of this today. Thank you, and we're happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Just a reminder to those on Zoom that it's the raise hand function to get in the question queue. If you're on the phone, it's *9. Please state your name and outlet and who you'd like to direct your question to. Your line is open.
I apologize, my phone line was cutting in and out, so I'm not sure if you addressed this issue or not, but we know that last week the Competition Bureau said that it wanted to investigate why prices are so high and whether there was a lack of competition in the sector making the problem worse. So I'm wondering what is different about what you're calling for from the provincial government today to what the Competition Bureau is doing federally?
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, first off, I want to acknowledge the fact that obviously this is an issue across the whole country, not just in Alberta, but in all areas. We saw that clearly when all parties came together and supported the fact that this needed to happen and an investigation needed to occur at the federal level. What we're calling for today is that the provincial government work in collaboration with us in the same way and look into what Alberta provincial policies can be implemented to help support Albertans with the food crisis. So that's why this investigation is so important. We do have the ability to do consumer protection under Service Alberta here in the province. And so now is the time for both the UCP to work in collaboration with the NDP and support Albertans with this food crisis.
Do you have another question, Lisa?
Okay, thanks. So if I'm just understanding this correctly, it's generally a call to investigate what the province might be able to do independently of the Federal Competition Bureau. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, we'll go to the next caller. Catherine, your line is open.
Oh, hi. Yeah, Catherine Gurkowski with Alberta Today here. So you did mention that there are some potential regulatory mechanisms that Service Alberta has, some consumer protection things. Can you give me an example of what's within provincial scope?
Sure. So I think, again, when we look at the consumer protection components under Service Alberta, they have the ability to look into, potential price gouging or to ensure that consumers are being protected when they're purchasing goods. So our question and part of the investigation with the committee, no different than what the federal government would be doing, is to ensure that consumers are being protected within provincial legislation. So we would be looking at this committee to investigate, to ensure that under the mechanisms of the provincial government, that they can protect, that inflationary cost. We know that food has gone up 10% month over month, and that's not keeping up with the inflationary levels that are already happening. We're seeing the market cooling in every other area but grocery prices. So it's not adding up, and we need to make sure that as legislators, we're protecting our constituents.
Do you have another question, Catherine?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I was clear, but so the investigation is going to look into, is it going to look into whether price gouging is occurring or what action the province can take? And I guess I'm trying to figure out what the province can do should there be price gouging. Like, would it be penalties? Are there laws that can be passed to, against this type of thing, or like what action is within provincial jurisdiction?
Yeah, and thank you for the question. That's why this committee is so important, is that first off, we have to recognize and be able to see what the issue is. We know that producers are not benefiting from the increase in food costs across the province, but yet we're seeing a 10% month over month increase. So obviously our producers are not seeing that benefit, so that's a problem. Also the fact that, the price is so high. So let's investigate to see what is actually happening within the market for our food costs. And then part of that would be recommendations through the experts that we're discussing with around what we can do as policymakers to help bring those costs down.
Thank you. We'll go to the next caller. And Carly, your line is open.
Hi, it's Carly Robinson with City News Edmonton. I know that when the Premier was asked in the past about working with the NDP on the affordability crisis, she pointed to your party's support of carbon tax measures that have been driving up cost of living as well during this time. I'm wondering what you would say to that and what your hopes are for next steps.
Well, I think I would say to the Premier that this is an opportunity for us to work in collaboration. We can come to an all-party committee through Community and Family Services. We can look at what the issues are, and we can help address the cost of living for Albertans. The reality of it is that the UCP have also increased insurance costs. They've increased utility costs. They haven't addressed the cost of gas. And so they also have mechanisms currently as the government to bring down that cost of living. But what I'm saying is that come to the committee, let's work in collaboration. They did it at the federal level. All 397 members voted in favor of recognizing the cost of food prices. It's time that we work in collaboration and do that and stop with the partisanship.
Do you have another question, Carly?
I just really want to be clear on this. I'm still a little confused as to, so this is definitely to look at more of what can be done. The looking to see if price gouging is happening is more at the federal level.
No, this is to recognize that right now we see in Alberta that our producers and Albertans are not seeing the value of the increases that are happening with our grocery prices. So if producers aren't seeing it and Albertans are paying more, then where is the money going and who's actually benefiting? We need to investigate that at a provincial level, and we need to protect both our producers and our consumers. And we can do that under Service Alberta. And so I would like the province to look into it and to get recommendations about how we bring that cost of living around food prices down.
Thank you. We'll do one more pass for questions. Just a reminder, if you're on the Zoom, it's the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, it's *9. Seeing none, that concludes our press conference for today. Thank you.
For watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.